Welcome to World Affairs Today, brought to you by the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C., a leading forum for global education and international affairs.
Good evening, and welcome to the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C. World Affairs Today program. Tonight, we turn to the subject of the struggling global economy. From Occupy Wall Street protesters to government regulators, numerous proposals have been put forward as to how best to resolve our economic woes. Tonight's speakers, Jacqui Dunne and Bernard Lietaer, will present what they see as the best way to address these problems and return us to prosperity. In their book, Rethinking Money, How New Currencies Turn Scarcity into Prosperity, they argue for the revision of decades-old financial institutions to fit our modern world. Making the case for complementary currencies, they see their incorporation as the best means to bring prosperity back to economically depressed peoples. Jacqui Dunne is an award-winning journalist from Ireland, founder and CEO of Danube Resources, an emerging leader in helping entrepreneurs develop technologies and initiatives that restore the Earth's equilibrium globally. Danube Resources serves as a fiscal agent for funding and works as the interface between the donors and the projects. Danube's unique value is its ability to work from a future reference point that draws out the greatness and builds upon the strengths of both the donor and the recipient, thus creating a flourishing paradigm shift for a quadruple bottom line: people, planet, profits, and power within. She currently resides in Colorado. Bernard Lietaer is one of the most knowledgeable people in the world of money and financial systems. During his career in finance and monetary system-related endeavors, Bernard has held an unusually array of diverse positions. As a senior central bank executive in Belgium, he was one of the two principal architects of the ECU, the convergence mechanism that developed into the European central currency, the euro. In recognition of his leadership as general manager of one of the world's most successful offshore currency funds, Business Week identified him as the world's top currency trader in 1991. He was also a professional consultant for more than a dozen years to multinational corporations on 4 continents, an advisor to developing countries in Latin America on how to optimize hard currency earnings, a professor in international finance, and president of the most comprehensive and cost-effective electronic payment system in the world. He is currently a research fellow at UC Berkeley, California. Please welcome Bernard and Jacqui.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We decided we're not going to sit. We're going to move around. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Let's try that one more time. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Now, with that slide, I have just sucked the oxygen out of this room. You're all saying, oh my God, I've got another I've got another 40 minutes to sit through this presentation before they serve the wine and cheese. You know, I could be home in my jammies watching reruns of Homeland or the next episode of Downton Abbey. What am I doing here? So I want to put you all at ease, very much at ease. We have an exciting series of stories to tell you, stories from all parts of the world about real people like you and I, and how they have come together within their communities to change scarcity, transform it into prosperity by their own unique rethinking of money. So with great excitement, we will share these anecdotes, some of them funny, and some of them I'm sure will amaze you in their ingenuity. But before we get into our great stories from around the world, and including here in America, I'm going to ask, what is money? And usually what people say when they're asked that question, they go to their billfold or their purse and they pull out a dollar bill. This is what money is. And in fact, we're going to say, in fact, it is something else. Money lives in the space of an agreement. It's an agreement to use something as a medium of exchange. For example, during the Second World War, cigarettes were used as a medium of exchange. Women's nylons were used as medium of exchange. You can use bottle tops as a medium of exchange. It's whatever a group that come together agree on as being a medium of exchange. And the thing about money is that it's so difficult for us to actually pull back and identify what money is, and more importantly, what it does to our society. It's like fish swimming in water. Ask a fish to describe water. It's virtually impossible. Sometimes there are flying fish that can actually get another perspective of water and can report back. So we're reporting back on our perspective from around the world of how other people are rethinking money.
Now, what we're going to be talking not only about money, the dollars, but also about other kinds of money. We call them complementary currencies. Now, what is their purpose? Well, if you look at the normal economy as an ocean with a bay in it, there's a big fish in there, there are lots of things happening. There's always stuff that's left out. When the economy has done its thing, there are a whole bunch of unused resources that are still left and a whole bunch of unmet needs. Sounds familiar? You probably met some of these things. So what is a complementary currency? It's a bridge between the two. It really works in parallel with the existing system, okay? Not in competition with it, but they fill each other in. Now, I'll give you an example. All of you know frequent flyer miles, right? That's 40 years old. Started as a marketing gimmick by American Airlines, actually. Today, there are 5 alliances of airlines. They're issuing 15 trillion airline miles, which is more than all the dollar bills counted together. Huh? It's a huge amount. That's 15,000 billion, all right? So they don't have to be small, those systems. What airline miles have proven is 2 things. Number one, you can change behavior patterns of people without forcing them. They do things differently. And you can do it on a large scale. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep on doing it, would they? And the second thing is it's possible to do this on a large scale cheaply. With the electronic age, we can do things in a big way if that turns out to be useful. So in the case of the commercial application of frequent flyer miles, the unmet need is a customer loyalty. That's what they couldn't get. And the unused resource is an empty chair. And they make sure that chair is empty. That's why they're going to have blackout areas around Christmas where everybody flies when the planes are full. So they're actually filling in a spare resource, which doesn't cost them anything, because if they have a person sitting there or not, guess what? Everything else is cost the same. But that's their way. That's their mechanism to cling this to. Now, the limits of frequent flyer miles, from my perspective, from our perspective, is basically, what else does it do? Nothing, right? Doesn't really help anybody, except the airlines, of course. But it doesn't really do much for the economy or for society. But why don't we using these technologies for things that matter? And that's what we talk about tonight. There are literally hundreds of thousands of systems on the commercial nature. You know them already, the miles that we talked about. Supermarkets do it, bookshops do it, everybody's been doing it. However, we're interested in what we call social purpose ones. They actually do something that's useful for society that otherwise wouldn't happen. This is a dozen countries. There are now well over 5,000 systems. Some of them, one of the countries that have been most effective initially in the 1990s was Japan. Today it's Brazil, and it's not even in the list here. Brazil is the leading country that has been applying what we've been talking about. for the last 10 years. And it's also one of the countries that has reduced fastest poverty. And it's not an accident.
Well, let's look at Brazil. There's one of my favorite stories actually comes from Curitiba, Brazil, which is in southeast Brazil. And the mayor at the time was a guy called Jaime Lerner, and he had a terrible problem. There was mass migration, I suppose, to this town, and as a result, a lot of favelas were built. These were shanty towns, absolutely packed with garbage. And there were only very, very narrow pathways or roadways, and the garbage trucks could not get up there to do the garbage collection. And as a result, the garbage mounted, there was disease, there were rats and vermin and all kinds of horror things. But on top of that, the mayor of Curitiba did not have any extra money in order to start a special collection. He couldn't get a loan from the central bank. So he said, we've got spare capacity on our bus service because the buses were run by the actual town themselves of Curitiba. So with that, he sent out a declaration, I suppose, for the kids to actually pick up the garbage, and he put around the circumference of the favelas different, I suppose, bins in different colors for different types of garbage, for glass, for paper, cardboard, another one for like vegetables and stuff that can rot. And for every bag of garbage that the kids picked up, they got a bus token. So within weeks, as you can imagine, all the kids went right through the favelas, picked up all the garbage, and the garbage was then recycled and sold. And the kids got tokens to actually ride on the buses, and they gave them to their parents. And within time, these tokens could actually be used in the local farmers markets to actually buy local produce. And out of that grew another project where if kids stayed at school, they would get a box of staples such as rice, cooking oil, and other staples for the family. So one of my most favorite pieces about this Curitiba story is that the fishermen, when they go out to bay, and sometimes there's no catch, they actually bring in garbage. And they bring the garbage into the recycling, and they actually get paid for the garbage they've actually brought in from the bay itself. The interesting thing about this was not just the fact that it was a nice way to clean up an area. Over time, the people of Curitiba itself had a standard of living that was a third higher than the rest of the country of Brazil, due primarily to having a complementary currency. There was a currency of real, the Brazilian currency, and there was this parallel currency for these bus tokens that the Curitibans used. Moving to another part of the world, to Europe, there is a particular other application of a complementary currency that Bernard actually designed in the town of Ghent in Belgium.
Ghent is the second largest town of Flanders. It is a fairly wealthy one. However, there is one neighborhood called Rabot, which is the poorest neighborhood of all of Flanders. That's the neighborhood they gave me. Okay? They have the usual problem that you can guess simply from the statistics. There are more than 20 languages spoken. Turkish is the dominant language. People can't communicate with each other. They don't share a language. And of course, you have garbage and all the other problems that you typically have in the poorest neighborhoods and the kind of neighborhoods, inner city neighborhoods as they call them here in this country. Now, we started off with a survey asking them, what is it that you really would like in your neighborhood? What is it that you dream of? And it came as a surprise. We want to have a bit of garden. You know, back in the home country, back in Anatolia, everybody has land. I was taught by my father and my grandfather how to grow vegetables and flowers, And here I'm living in the 15th floor of a building without a square meter. We would like to have a little garden. What? So here was the design. The result looks like that. There was a factory that had gone bankrupt in the neighborhood. That had been destroyed. You have the cement floor still left. That's basically what's left. They did it themselves. They created those gardens themselves. However, the key is there. For 4 square meters of the gardens, you can get them only for rent, but only for torocus, a currency that was designed for that neighborhood, that's issued by the town. You need to have 150 torocus in order per year to rent your little lot. Well, the result was immediately, okay, how the hell do we get those torocus? You can't get them for euros, you can't get for national money, okay? So, well, there's a list of activities that the city wants to encourage, okay? They went to, for example, clean the neighborhood, which is what's happening here, right? On the left, you have the bills, the 1 and 10 torocus. And besides the gardens, you can also use them for vegetables in the season and low energy lamps, which the city wants to encourage. All the things that the city wants you to do, would like you to do, is paid in torocus. If you put a flower box, on the street side, in the street, you get 10 torocus. If you help clean up the neighborhood, as I showed you here, that we get 5 torocus per hour. Okay? You have a whole list of activities that the city wants to encourage, but they're only paid in torocus. Here is one of the other activities, was actually planting flowers around in other parts of town. Okay? And their own parts as well. Now, one of the results was, for the first time in the history of Ghent, they had more volunteers than they knew what to do with. They had to really invent new activities. And for the same euro budget that this neighborhood had, they had 3 to 20 times more results. Because the torocus, what do they cost to the town? Actually, the cost of printing them. And printed a lot for, that was it. Another example, which is actually created right here by a gentleman whom I have the honor to call a friend, Edgar Kahn, who had been living his entire life here in Washington, D.C., and has designed for the last 20 years a currency in America called the time dollar. And time banking is the only currency that is in this country officially tax-free. You can do activities in time dollars. Actually, it's an illegal immigrant can only earn that currency, theoretically. All right? And again, it's doing a lot of things, and well, we can perhaps give a couple of examples.
Yes, there's a program that's been launched this week in Washington, D.C., where kids mentor younger children, and for every hour that they spend mentoring, either teaching them a language or helping them through their schoolwork, they will get time dollars. And the idea then is, with their families that are supporting the younger kids to learn, these can be then turned in for baskets of food. So it's called Students as Breadwinners. That's one example. The largest time banking system is in New York. There's 2,000 people, and a lot of the time is actually used in helping immigrants coming to New York to actually learn the actual languages. And what they have found is there's a great deal of interaction between different neighbors that would not have necessarily spoken to one another, because they're together trying to resolve whatever the issue is. Time banking is now in over 34 countries around the world. There are about 400 of these time banking programs here in the United States, and they're growing by about 1 to 2 programs every week.
This is your.
Yeah, I'll talk to you about Furi Aikipu. The problem in Japan is that they have a rapidly aging population and not the resources to look after them. So they set up this program called Furi Aikipu, which means caring friendship tickets. And for every hour that I spend with a neighbor, perhaps driving her to a doctor's appointment or helping him write a letter to their insurance company or helping them resolve some kind of issue in their house, I get an electronic credit in my Furi Aikipu account, which I can then save when I'm older and I need help, or alternatively, I can actually transfer them to a relative or a friend of mine in another part of the country. What's very, very interesting about the Furi Aikipu system is that it's actually backed by the government. And what they found in the experience for the older people is they loved it, absolutely loved it, because they could remain in their own homes longer. They did not have to be institutionalized. Furthermore, there were intergenerational friendships growing as a result of dropping in and saying hello and helping out. Relationships developed, and respect between different age groups developed and grew. And on top of that, it was not costing the government any money to actually run this program. There was a slight fee for the NGO that ran it, you know, from an administrative perspective. But the reports, this has been going on for about 10 years, 12 years now?
It started in 94.
94, okay. And there are almost 500 systems operational in Japan with 2 electronic clearinghouses. And this design is actually similar to time banking, for example, where there's elder care. In New York, for example, Mayor Bloomberg has in the 5 boroughs of New York, has a visiting nursing program that's actually based on time banking as well.
This is the Chiemgauer in southern Germany. This is a commercial currency in the sense that you can use it in shops in the whole area around. That's just south of Munich.
Yeah.
Notice these little stamps here. These little stamps are a mechanism to convince people to use them and not to store them. Okay, so every quarter you have to. You need to buy a little stamp, and that costs you euros, so people tend to spend it. At the beginning, businesses didn't like it. This system has been operational also since 95, 96. Now they love it. Because what happens is all the currency gets spent in the quarter. Okay? This was initially started by Steiner School in southern Bavaria,
yeah.
in Chiemgau. This is in Japan. These are low technology systems. You actually have, every member has a little booklet. And when I do something for you, we sign up, okay, my amount, and you debit your stuff on your booklet, and I do credit mine on my booklet, and we have a signature of the other person. The system is self-maintained.
So basically, that's a very low-tech system.
Here's
and
a
here's the
high-tech
high-tech system. Yeah.
These are smart cards with a smart chip. This is in the city of Yamato, about 70 kilometers, 70 miles north of Tokyo. I was there invited for the inauguration. You may notice everything is in Japanese except the word love. It stands for local value exchange. All right? We could continue. I'm working with more than 50 different models around the world, so I've given you a few. One interesting one, you went to the
I want you to talk about the where. I think one thing you've just got to remember, why suddenly are there all these complementary currencies? I mean, in 1984, there were only 2 major complementary currencies in the world. So there has been a confluence of cheaper computing, access to the internet and social media. So anybody can log on now and look up complementary currencies or local currencies and be inundated with YouTube videos, examples that actually sparks ideas of how a community might come together and resolve its problems.
The WIR was started as one of the two grandfathers that Jacqui mentioned. This started in 1934 in the Big Depression by 17 business people in Switzerland. The currency has been operational now for 75 years. Okay, so this happens in capitalist countries. This is not a strange thing, and it doesn't have to be a poor country or a poor neighborhood. A quarter of all businesses in Switzerland belong to that system. Now, what's interesting, my colleague from Rensselaer University, James Stoddard, has made a study because the one thing that we have to say about the Swiss is they know how to do accounting, right? I mean, so their data is very good quality, both at the national level and in the WIR system. So it's a perfect case for analyzing what that thing does in practice to the economy. And the answer is, it is actually a secret weapon for the stability of the economy. Why is it that Switzerland is a country that you take a bunch of Germans, you add a few French, a little sprinkling of Italians, and suddenly the whole thing gets stable, right? What's funny about this, right? And the secret weapon is not the mountains.
Or the water.
Otherwise, the Himalayas would be fantastic, stable.
It's not the water.
It's not water. And it's not the chocolates, because other Belgium would be fantastic. We have better chocolates than that. So that's it. The mechanism works as follows, okay? The reason that it stabilized the economy is very reasonable. We don't have to do actually macroeconomic studies to do it. It has been done that way. It works because of the following fact. If you give the choice to a Swiss business guy between 1,000 Swiss francs and 1,000 WIR, he will always take the 1,000 Swiss francs. Why? With the 1,000 Swiss francs, he can pay his taxes. With the 1,000 Swiss francs, he can go vacations in Cancun and he can buy stuff from China. With these 1,000 WIR, he has to spend them among the 78,000 businesses, which will give you a lot of places to spend. But it's still not the same, so it's less liquid. So you have that preference. Now what happens? If you're in a boom period, if the economy is booming, I have a small business, I am fully busy, all my staff is fully busy, you come with 1,000 WIR, I'll say, come back next month. We are in a recession, half of my staff is idle, you come at 1,000 WIR, thank you. So it does exactly, it stabilizes the economy because the volumes and the number of participants in the WIR system is counter-cyclical with the economy. That's what central bankers try to do without success. But here it's done bottom up.
And also there's another interesting point to this, is that about 16% of all small to medium-sized businesses in Switzerland use the WIR. So it's not some little marginal neighborhood thing.
Okay, there is another model which I won't get into more details because they're actually a better model than the WIR to create jobs. Because this stabilizes particularly the job environment, right? Because all the jobs are in small and medium-sized businesses, 80, 90%. And small businesses have always a cash flow problem. The C3 is being developed in Brazil and in Uruguay and is an improved WIR, which makes it convertible. The WIR is not convertible. If you have WIR, you have to spend them with members of the WIR system. In the case of the C3, you can actually exchange them for national money through a process which I won't get into because it's more technical. Brazil has, for the last 12 years now, there was one project in in the Noreste, Banco Palmas, which has proven so successful that they're now launching 200 dual currency banks with the technical support from the Banco do Brasil. Okay? And it is reducing poverty significantly. About this year, the country of Lithuania, where I was about 9 months ago, is now implementing a currency for realizing dreams, for a learning currency. They want to have the entire country become trilingual, among other things. Okay, so the learning is decided at the bottom up, and it's getting paid in doras. And the dora is like we did for the gardens, but on a larger scale, on a national level. The Terra is a global currency. That's nobody's national currency. Currently, the dollar is a global currency. What Paul Volcker told me in my central banking days, when I asked him, you know, what are your priorities when you have a conflict between what's important for the United States and for the world? And he said, well, look, the US is paying my salary. My priorities go to what is important for America. Screw the world. That was his expression. England did the reverse when it was in charge of the global currency. It actually sacrificed the economy in Britain in order to stretch the period in which the pound was going to be a global currency. So you have a conflict. There are 2/3 of the time there is no conflict, but 1/3 of the time there is a conflict. So why would you need that? So we can create a currency that is actually a global currency that would make it profitable to think long term. All these examples are shown in the book. And completely, what I'm describing is not just kind of cute ideas. There's a theoretical framework behind that that's been developed over the last 6 years. And it is about, we have been able to prove scientifically that, and it will sound very strange, I know, that a system, an economy with a single currency, which has been drilled in our head now for 700 years, that you need a single currency in the entire field of economics, every textbook in economics assumes a single currency in a country.
Maybe we can explain what we mean by a single currency. You know, when you look at a euro or a US dollar or yen, it's all the same type of money. It's bank debt money. It's fiat currency. They may have different pictures, may look different, but it's the same type of money.
Created in the same way.
Created in the same way. So,
well, maybe you should just check one thing here.
Yes.
How many of you believe that the governments create money? Anybody? About, yes?
Yeah.
Who? Were?
I mean, I believe that. Like,
You believe that? Okay.
to some extent, yeah.
Let me tell you the bad news. It's not true.
Voting a lot.
Okay? Governments are, when they need money, they have to borrow it from the private sector, just like you. Okay? And who creates then the money?
Yeah.
Banks. You're right. The banking system. Okay? 90%, more than 90% of every dollar that you've seen is created by private bank debt. When you actually get a loan from a bank to buy a house, that is when the money is created. They say it technically in Latin, fiat money. You used the word a few minutes ago. They do that, let me show you don't understand. Right? Fiat money refers to the capacity to create money out of nothing, ex nihilo in Latin, okay? By the power of the word of a banker, to be precise, okay? So
I can jump in here for a second. We're saying that the conventional money is brilliant at what it did. It was invented at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. It came out of the Scientific Revolution. And before then, in order to have money, you either had to rob or plunder, or through war, you either married into it or you inherited it. With the invention of what we call modern money, bank debt money, it fueled the Industrial Revolution. It would have been impossible to have the Industrial Revolution without bank debt money. So that's why we say there is a role for this money, the conventional, and that's why we say there is a secondary tandem role to work in tandem with these complementary currencies. So there's a very important place for this money. However,
if we now have been able to prove in 4 peer-reviewed academic papers accepted internationally that if you try to have a currency, an economy with a single currency, you will always get instabilities. Okay, so I'm going to be a little faster on that. But first of all, we have had, on the average, and since 1970, 10 crashes, 10 countries having a crash per year. If you had a car with that track record, or a plane with that track record, don't you think that someone would have sent people back to the drawing board? Okay, that includes, that's 425 total since 1970, right? 145 banking crashes, like the one we had in 2007. 72 sovereign debt crisis, like you have right now in Greece. And we had 208 monetary crashes, i.e. the currency collapsing, like it would have in Argentina or in Russia. And before that, if you believe it just started in 1970, it's not true either. It started much earlier. Actually, it starts since the beginning of modern money, the 17th century. We now can prove that such an approach is actually systemically unstable, structurally unstable. Why? Sustainability, we've been able to work on the conditions of sustainability, of stability, of a complex flow network, any complex flow network. Okay? And the sustainability of such a system is conditional on two things: the balance between efficiency on the one side, the capacity for the system to process volume of what you want to go through your thing. In the economic field, that's basically GNP, right? Quantity of dollars flowing through the economy per year. In a natural ecosystem, that is biomass per square meter, grams of biomass per square meter per year, right? So we have a lot of data on this stuff. And the other one is resilience, which is the capacity for a system to change and adapt to different conditions, or changing conditions, or an attack, or a disease. And in natural networks, natural ecosystems, the resilience is 3 times more important than efficiency. In financial systems, efficiency is the only thing that matters. Okay, and let's be clear, we're talking of efficiency, the capacity for a system to process volume. The banking system today is extraordinarily efficient at processing huge volumes of money. There's 4 trillion per day processed in the foreign exchange market, for example. That's 50 times more than all the purchases and sales internationally, right? Per day, right? So you have a very efficient system, and because it's so efficient, what they have done is push efficiency too far, and it becomes very brittle. And there are 2 key variables that are conditioned to that. One of them is diversity, which depends on the structure of the system. One is diversity. Here is a rainforest, hugely diverse ecosystem. And the other one is interconnectivity. This is a squirrel in Central Park in New York. For 50 generations, it hasn't seen anything natural, right? So, including nice strawberries, right? Now, low diversity, which is more efficient. The best way to have a forest growing more timber per year is that, okay? Usable timber. However, make sure you don't drop a little bit of glass or a cigarette, because the whole thing will blow up and disappear, like we did in Colorado last year. And this cute animal that you all know, I have one here in the zoo, I think, in Washington, a famous one. The problem it has, it eats only one type of bamboo. Not a good idea. Maybe cute, but it doesn't work. So, to conclude this, I'm showing this as images because it is a lot more palatable than equations. By the way, the equations at the beginning of the stuff came from the proof of what I'm talking about here. We have a monetary system that is too efficient. It doesn't have any resilience because it doesn't have any backups. If something goes wrong with the banking system, everything stops. That's why we need to save them. Okay? That's what the governments learned in the 1930s. If you don't save the banking system, everything stops. And that's only because it is a monoculture. If you give a monoculture to such an environment, you take that risk, just like in a match with this thing.
So what we're saying is it's not the amount of money that goes through an economy, it is actually the type of money, and what we're advocating is different types. So communities can be described as a business community, as in the WEIR that Bernard described. It could be a geographical community, as we had, for example, at the Curitiba example. It could be a religious community. Community can be on the internet, however you wish to define a community. But it means bringing this community together and them sitting down and making an inventory. What are our unused resources and what are our unmet needs? And I tell you, the unused resources are usually human capital, labor, ingenuity, and the unmet needs, some of them we just touched on. How do you get a business financed, for example? How do we take care of our elderly? How do we educate our children? How do we make sure that people do not go to bed hungry each night? And we can address these issues by communities coming together, aided with technology, such as cheaper computing, access to the internet, social media, to link their unused resources and their unmet needs by designing a currency. And I love this particular quote from Margaret Mead. "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." So what we are talking about, in short, is the democratization of money.
For the first time in human history. Okay? We have a long history of money, and it's never been democratic. Okay? Now it can become so. Now, there are 4 reasons why we claim that the time has come to do something. The first one is this one.
Lots of trouble.
You can look up from top down, right or left. It actually has a fairly similar outcome. Second one is that image, which is not aesthetically pleasing. It doesn't come from a leftist journal somewhere in France. It comes from The Economist. The third one is the box. The current box has stopped working. For the last 5 years, they've been trying to get this economy going, and it isn't working. They have been pumping more money into the system than actually exists since Adam and Eve, and it isn't doing anything.
And when you look at the levels of poverty, when the quote-unquote war on poverty was started way back under the Johnson administration, it's still there at 11%. And how they define poverty is stunning. I mean, I think there are far more people that are actually living in poverty and impoverished lives. So we really haven't seen a big move of that needle, despite very well-intended people, very good intentions. And the problem has been they have not looked at the main underlying systemic problem, which is the money system.
And then the final one is this one. I see a number of ladies here. They will understand what I'm talking about probably better than others. I mentioned history. We have 5,000 years of monetary history. With the current system was the first time introduced in Sumer, i.e. a monopoly of a single currency issued top-down with interest. Started in Sumer, 3200 BC. You find it in China, you find it in Babylonia, you find it in Rome, you find it in Greece, and you find it in the modern world since the Renaissance. What do they have in common? They're all patriarchal societies. In a patriarchal society, well, if you want to know whether you're in a patriarchal society or not, it's fairly simple. The simplest way is to look at the image of the divine. If the divine is represented only by a man with a big beard, who's done it all without a girlfriend, you are in a patriarchal society. Okay? Now, in patriarchal societies, they always have imposed, well, the ones that have been most developed have always succeeded in imposing a monopoly of a single currency with a positive interest rate. What is the interest rate important for? Actually, it's an extraction device. By definition, interest is what you pay, that people pay who don't have enough money, have to borrow, to people who have more money than they need because they can lend it to someone else, or the people who control the creation of money. Okay? So it's a systemic contraction device, extraction device. There are good things about that. As Jacqui mentioned earlier, the Industrial Revolution wouldn't have happened, I believe, without modern money. However, it also creates booms and bust cycles. And we're now in a bust one. You may have noticed. It concentrates wealth automatically without doing anything. You just sit there. If you're wealthy, you become more wealthy because you get more interest.
Or you could take all the wealth away from those that are wealthy, redistribute it, and with positive interest rates over time, the concentration of wealth may go to different people, but there still would be the same concentration of wealth.
And finally, it's not compatible with community. The countries that are the most developed are also the ones that have community crisis. Neighborhoods, people don't know each other anymore, they don't say anything. Why is that? That's not accidental. It relates to the money system. Why? Community is built on the basis of gift exchanges. Traditional societies know that very well. Okay? So once you do replace a gift exchange with a commercial transaction in which money is taking place, that is how we define actually development. The United Nations defines development in terms of GNP per capita, i.e. how much dollars are being exchanged. And anything that's not exchanged with dollars is considered not existing. Right?
Think about a lot of women's work or men that stay at home to raise children. That doesn't turn up in GDP.
And if I give a dollar bill to my girlfriend for her birthday, she will not like it. It's not compatible.
A dollar bill would not go down very well with your girlfriend, I might say.
So there are a few examples. There are fewer than the patriarchal ones. A few. One of them is Egypt, and the other one is the Central Middle Ages, in which the big role was played by a lady, Isis in the case of Egypt, and in the case of the cathedral period, which is the Central Middle Ages I'm talking about, where all cathedrals were built, they were built in a period for a lady. It was Notre Dame. So in matrifocal societies, you always have two currencies. You have the currency that you trade with people that you don't know long distance, which is identical to the patriarchal one. In the case of Egypt, there was gold bars and silver and gold rings with Mesopotamia, for example. And a second one that's created bottom up, where the rules are all the opposite. And where you have a penalty of storing the money, keeping the money up. Inverse of interest, negative interest rate, like we had in the Chiemgauer, remember? So in those systems, you have an economic stability for centuries. No booms and bust cycles. You had the highest quality of living for the people living at the bottom of society was during these periods. And finally, it was compatible with community. I think we have an opportunity. The technology is available. We know how to do this. I think we can use the masculine and the feminine energy, because conventional money is extremely masculine, all competitive, very competitive. We call it the competitive currency. And if you want to make the test of it, it's very simple. You give $1 million in a normal family on the table, come back 2 weeks later, everybody's fighting. Right? And with the feminine energy that actually will balance this stuff. Thank you very much for your attention.
I kind of had a multi-part question when it comes to the gold standard. I've seen some articles where China has considered possibly, or might be considering going to a gold standard. And I guess my first question is, how would that affect that type of system? Second question is, I've seen some stuff on a Glass-Steagall type deal that would divide pretty much a national sovereign currency or credit system from the high-risk Wall Street type system. And I just wanted your thoughts on that. And then lastly, you already mentioned how certain states are looking at adopting, going back to their own currencies, which was something, before the end of the Revolutionary War, where each state had their own currency, and they obviously had a lot of issues with it back then. So I just wanted to see how that would play out in terms of not only going back to local community base, but state, like those different tiers. You have the communities, then you have the state, and then you have, the federal, U.S. dollar. How does that all play out and work?
Well, to answer, your third question first, if I may, that's what we're advocating, is that there's different types of currencies at all different types of all different levels of subsidiarity. So there would be like the Terra, which would be a corporate global currency used for contractual purposes. There would be bunches of states, nation states, that would have the conventional currency. There might be some regional currencies. The Chiemgau you saw earlier referred to is part of a regio network in Germany and Austria, and they have divided into regions, and you have a regional currency that support regions. You have then, city currencies, you have neighborhood currencies. So this is the ecology that Bernard was referring to when he was talking about the rainforest. That's what we need. So if something goes wrong with one, or there's a problem with one, there's something else to back, so you can continue your commerce and trading, whatever you need to do.
So it would be a similar currency exchange? I mean,
How do you
going
mean
from
similar?
Well, the value,
Yeah.
I would suggest, I don't try to make it a fixed exchange rate, because you're going to automatically the next day create a back market, right? So if you want to keep it clean, let it float.
Right.
And people will accept the currency at different prices. It is less efficient. It is less efficient. Every economist will tell me it's less efficient.
Right.
True. But it will be more resilient. If something happens, not everything will think at the same time. Okay, you don't put all your eggs in the same basket. Don't put all your
notes.
Exactly.
all your money in the same type of currency.
I have two brief questions. First of all, what is the likelihood of financial meltdown or collapse given the tremendous amount of derivative in the current system? On top of the actual money, there's also a lot of piggyback, a lot of derivatives which are floating around trillions of dollars, much more than the actual money. So to what extent that exacerbates the risk of an accident, a financial accident? And the second question is more spiritual. You mentioned the role of communities, individuals coping with monetary situations and so on. What do you think, to what extent it is important for individual, the little man, so to speak, to become in life mentally and spiritually rich in addition to financially rich?
Okay.
Wow. Wow, it's an interesting one. I think some of the richest people in the world are those with good friends and good health. Unfortunately, you cannot bring that to the bank and cash it in. But I do agree with you from a spiritual perspective. And I think it's easier to operate more spiritually in the world once you have food in your belly and once you have your needs taken care of. And I think democracy is enormous, the groundswell of democracy. I don't think we can have democracy if there are huge differences between those that have and those that don't have. So one of the reasons why I actually started to write this book was actually it came out of a spiritual questioning, because having read spiritual texts, and the writers talk about, don't worry about money, your needs are taken care of, just think about your relation with the divine. And my experience, I think, like everybody else here in the room, it was very, very different. We saw, people dying because they didn't have enough food. We've seen war break out over resources. We've seen families torn apart over inheritance or divorces or whatever might happen. So,
On the other hand, there are a lot of greedy people that really do not need the money and they keep on accumulating.
well, their accumulation may be due to greed, but the accumulation, as Bernard pointed out, is one of the functional dynamics of interest. It causes a concentration of wealth. And so it's not just, quote unquote, their fault. It is a function of the money itself. But in listening to, and I heard Bernard actually telling the story of Curitiba, and when we met about a dozen years ago, and it was that story for me that I actually sat up in my seat and said, wow, now I see how there can be sufficiency. I now can see how people can have dignity. It is by a dual currency system, a multi-currency system. And that spiritual piece of how there can be sustainable abundance was answered for me in my work with Bernard.
May I address your first question?
Please.
The question was, what is the probability of having a major crash? The answer is 100%. It's just a question of when. The theoretical work I showed you, well, I referred to, okay, is this system is systemically unstable. As long as you keep a monopoly of a single currency and enforce it, you will have an unstable system. And it's just a question of when and where, but not if, that it will crash again. So that's precisely why you can prove that we need to have an ecosystem, and then it will make it possible to at least amortize the shocks and actually give a chance for systems to develop that would be able to adapt to the new environment of the 21st century. And it's an extraordinary opportunity, actually. We have enough food and everything else on this planet to feed everybody. But we don't have enough. The people are starving, but there is no market because there's no money. That's rather strange, isn't it? So that's where the problem is.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, we had so much fun writing this book, and I really hope that you have a great deal of fun reading the book, because a lot of love and excitement went into writing this book, and I hope when you read it you come away with that feeling.
Thank you for joining us for World Affairs Today, a production of the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C. Stay connected with us at www.worldaffairstoday.org.